it's time now for what could be, actually, it's almost building into a sort of game show, Fake or Fact with Andrew Eborn. He's going to take us on a tour of the fake news that's around at the moment and try and educate us into how we can sort of look at something and then question whether it's the real thing.
Yes.
And, of course, today is Armistice Day, and fake or fact was actually an issue during the war as well, wasn't it? Because
Absolutely.
propaganda and fakery, well, it was very big weapon in the war.
Absolutely, and fake news has been used as a weapon of war for actually eternity, going all the way back to the Roman times and beforehand. But I thought we'd have a little canter through some of the fake stories, and you can guide me on this sort of stuff as appropriate. But during the 1917 war, for example, there was a big story which happened about British newspapers, including the Times and the Mail and the Express. They carried a story about dead soldiers being used to basically for soap and margarine, bodies being abused.
British soldiers.
And also German soldiers. Right. And the whole idea was to control the mindset against the Germans. And some of the headlines, I think we've got some of these here from the old newspapers. We can pull those up. You can see these. This is the headlines in the Times. It's the headlines in the other bits and pieces as well. I think this is slightly different. This is some old footage. But there we go. These are the headlines here. So you've got the bits about... Britain was basically trying to bring China into the war on the Allied side.
The Hun's Corpse Factory.
Exactly.
Says the middle one. And the Kaiser's Ghouls.
Cannibalism. Horrors of the trade in the dead.
Well, people must have believed those.
Well, and this is the problem. They always say if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read them, you're misinformed. Well, this is a classic story from 1917. And what happened, a little bit, confession later on, basically it was to get China involved in the war. And they did join the war. They declared war against Germany on the 14th of August, 1917, because they were appalled by this story and say, look, they're barbaric, we must absolutely support this. And it turned out there was a confession later on. I mean, you know that's false now because we've said about that sort of stuff. But John Chanteris, who was head of intelligence, he confessed that what he'd actually done to fool the Chinese, he'd swapped the pictures of horses going to the glue factory with the corpses of the soldiers. And he basically said, look, this is what Germany's doing on that sort of basis. And that's what caused the outrage. But it's a classic example of actually where the papers conspired as well to spread this misinformation and disinformation about the war.
Doesn't seem right somehow. I have to say, I am uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, but then it's war.
But it's of the times. I mean, that wouldn't happen now to that extent.
Well, you say that.
You say that.
So. And this is the problem, because I always say, famously said, that the first casualty in war is the truth. And what's happening at the moment, we'll come on to this as well, but you can guide your way through all of the wars throughout history. History repeats itself. And you might remember there was during the World War II with Churchill at the head of it, in 1941, he authorised the set up of a transmitter called Aspidistra.
Yes,
do you remember Aspidistra?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And it was the most powerful transmitter in the world at that stage. And there were they put two transmitters together from RCA in the States, because it was illegal to have those transmitters.
There you are.
There we go. There's a picture of it. It looks, which is in Cromer. It's still there. You can go and visit it. And what happened? This was used for two purposes. One is they used to do fake news stories, because they could, being the most powerful, they could transmit to virtually anywhere. And they transmitted to German, and they did a sort of German station for the German soldiers. And they would play jazz music for people with food. But the news at 9, thank you, would turn around and give these fake bulletins. And they were basically, the idea was to control the hearts and mind of the German population.
So these fake bulletins would be sort of telling the listeners that the war was going badly for
them. Exactly. So they would get demoralised, and as a result...
whereas that as a tactic, I can sort of understand and say, yes, what a good idea. Whereas the first one...
it's distasteful, isn't it?
Is different somehow, but Aspidistra works.
But that's what happened. You're trying to... It's all about hearts and minds. It's about poppies and propaganda, I call it.
We see one which is almost sort of in the spy game, if you like. It was Operation Mincemeat that a lot of people have heard of.
And turned into Colin Firth was in a brilliant movie. If you haven't seen that, 1921, he was in that movie.
It's called Mincemeat, I think, isn't it?
It's called Operation Mincemeat. And what happened, again, this was Churchill. He sort of, and you can see this is the letter authorising, saying that Churchill has basically authorised this. And the idea is they wanted to dissuade Germany from the fact that the real target of an invasion was Sicily. So what they had to try and do is come up with this glorious plan where they would have this fake body. They created a Major William Martin, who was a complete completely fictitious character. But they made him, you had to give him an identity, so they had a little theatre stub, he had a picture of his fake fiancée, had an engagement ring receipt, all that sort of stuff.
And what they did is they got the body from the local morgue.
Yes.
And it was of a homeless man.
Who'd been poisoned with rat poison, what it was.
But, and then they dropped it in the sea somewhere.
So they dropped it about a mile off the coast of Spain, and what happened, it floated in, it landed in the enemy's hands, and they looked at all these secret documents. They were convinced by the story, and rather than looking at Sicily, they deployed double the forces elsewhere. So as a result, they could go to Sicily, and on 30th of April 1943, that's when the body of this fake Major William Martin was...
and it fooled them.
And it totally fooled them. The invasion of Sicily happened on the 9th of July 1943 and was successful because the Germans had deployed their plans elsewhere. So it's the idea of creating a sort of fake story on that sort of basis.
It reminds me of Churchill's plan as well to tell the nation, and therefore spread it to Germany too, was that we were feeding... The reason our pilots knew there was incoming wasn't because of radar, because we weren't owning up to actually inventing that. It was because we fed our pilots carrots.
Yes.
And carrots help you see in the dark. And they don't. It's just that... And we've believed it. Generations have believed it ever since. But it was a really, really very famous propaganda
And it's really powerful. And Edward Bernays, the father of PR, he always said the best way of selling anything to anybody is through fear. And you work on that sort of basis. And a really powerful human emotion. Also, hate is a powerful human emotion, which is why you're getting all these images. And I always urge people, you will absolutely question everything. But yes.
I was going to say, the difference is, and what is worrying now, is these are sort of official things, if you like, on a major scale, because only governments could do this.
Yes.
Whereas now we're in a situation where people can do, individually, almost whatever you want with a little bit of skill. And look at this Sadiq Khan issue. Now, whether you like him or loathe Sadiq Khan, this new video which has emerged of him, where he seems to be suggesting the Remembrance Weekend commemoration should be delayed.
And I won't play you the audio, but I can read you what was said. It's basically said, the buck stops with me. Mark reports to me, and obviously...
Mark Rowley.
Exactly. Yeah. I know we have Armistice Day on Saturday, but why should Londoners cancel the Palestinian March on Saturday? Why don't they have Remembrance Weekend next weekend? What's happening in Gaza is much bigger than this weekend, and it's current. And it was done with his voice. And it fooled a lot of people. And the problem is this. It got spread to everybody. And talking about fear, you know, they sort of say that a lie goes halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. And what happens, lies spread. And it's been spread on social media, and it's a fake recording. It's an AI recording. But it's very, very difficult to tell.
Before we run out of time, just very shortly to show it, and I think we've got the video of this, is there's manipulated video of President Zelensky in Ukraine calling on his citizens to surrender to Russia. I think we've got it.
Exactly. And this is but you can tell. This is a very early recording of it. But if you're looking at it and you make it slightly grainier and everything else, this is a classic AI thing where basically he said, look, lay down your arms. This is the one. He was talking. It was in, obviously, he was speaking. It was deep faked. We had that sort of image. And it was basically, there was a similar edited video of Putin where basically he sort of says, go home while you're still alive. So people are using, what basically, fake news was the word of the year in 2017. AI, as I predicted, on this very stage, on this very studio, is the word, Collins' word of the year this year. You combine AI and fake news, and nowadays it is the biggest weapon of war.
Yeah, which is terrifying because for most of us, that Zelensky one, not overly convincing. You can sort of tell it's not right.
But you're right,
for most of us,
it's grainy and everything, isn't it?
Yeah. But for most of us, you're not going to spot it. And like the Sadiq Khan thing, you wouldn't know listening to that.
You wouldn't. And you see, and we've talked previously about all these AI images, and every single day there are fake images which are out there, and you're appealing to people's heartstrings. You go all the way back to what I was saying about 1917, and people are, it's abhorrent suggestions.
It's scary.
That's what happens.
OK, Andrew, as always,
Brilliant. Thank you.
Really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.